The sky above New Haven burned with an ugly orange glow. Commander Una stood on the command platform, watching the orbital defense grid fail one section at a time. Each explosion in the atmosphere marked another shield generator dying, another gap in their protection. The Krillian bioships moved through space like massive insects, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly light as they tore through everything the Valorans had built. Commander, Sector 7 is gone, Captain Hyan reported from his station. His webbed hands moved across the holographic controls, trying to redirect power from failing systems to anything that might still work. The eastern shield is collapsing. We have maybe 20 minutes before they can land ground forces directly into the city. Una felt her throat tighten. 20 minutes. Millions of Valorans still crowded the underground shelters, pressed together in the dark tunnels beneath the capital. The elderly, the children, the artists and teachers and farmers who had never known war. Her people had spent 3 centuries building a peaceful society on this world. Now it would end in blood and screaming. Send another distress call on all frequencies, she ordered. Tell them we need immediate military assistance. Tell them we're dying here. Hyan's expression told her everything. They had been sending those calls for 6 hours. The galactic community was silent. The Therosian Empire claimed they were too far away to help in time. The Confederation of Free Worlds offered thoughts and prayers, but no ships. The wealthy core systems promised to send aid ships after the battle was over, to help with cleanup and recovery. As if there would be anyone left to recover. Down in the engineering bay, Nari wiped sweat from her forehead and focused on the damaged power coupling in front of her. Her hand shook as she tried to reconnect the severed conduits. The shield emitter above the capital was the last one still functioning, and it was dying. She could hear it in the grinding noise from the generators, feel it in the vibrations through the floor. Nari, we need to evacuate, her supervisor called out. The building won't survive another bombardment. 5 more minutes, Nari shouted back. I can stabilize it. I just need 5 minutes. She didn't have 5 minutes. Nobody did. But she kept working anyway, because the alternative was accepting that everyone she loved would die tonight. Her brother Tay was somewhere in the Western District, helping load children onto the last transport vehicles. Their parents were in Shelter 42 with 10,000 other civilians. If the shield fell, the Krillian bombardment would turn the underground tunnels into mass graves. The building shook as another explosion bloomed in the upper atmosphere. Nari grabbed the support beam to keep from falling. Through the window, she could see the streaks of Krillian biopods entering the atmosphere. They looked like falling stars, beautiful and terrible. Each one carried hundreds of warriors, creatures that moved like wolves and fought with claws, designed to tear through armor and flesh alike. Tay pushed another crying child into the transport, speaking softly in Valoran to calm the terrified youngster. It's going to be okay. You're going to be safe underground. Your parents are waiting for you. The lie tasted bitter. He didn't know if the child's parents were alive. He didn't know if anyone would be alive by morning. All around him, the city was emptying. Buildings stood dark and abandoned. The beautiful gardens that his people took such pride in were trampled and forgotten. The canals that normally flowed with clean water reflected the burning sky. A Valaran security officer grabbed his arm. Last transport is full. We need to go now. The Krillians will be landing in minutes. Tay looked back at the empty street. Were there more people hiding in the buildings? More children who needed saving? But the transport engines were already powering up, and the security officer was pulling him toward the vehicle. He climbed aboard just as the doors sealed shut. Through the window, he watched the first Krillian pods impact in the distance. They hit the ground like meteors, and moments later, the warriors emerged. Even from far away, Tay could see how they moved with terrifying speed and coordination. The Valaran security forces, Brave civilians with shock weapons and riot shields tried to form a defensive line. They lasted less than 30 seconds. On the command platform, Yuna watched her world collapse. The tactical display showed Krillian forces landing in 18 locations across the capital. Her security teams were being slaughtered. The underground shelters would buy time, but once the Krillians figured out where the civilians were hiding, it would be over. "Commander, we're receiving a communication," Hyan said suddenly. His eyes widened as he listened. "It's not on standard frequencies. Someone's broadcasting on an old emergency channel." "Put it through," Yuna ordered. Static filled the command center. Then a voice cut through. It spoke Galactic Common with an accent Yuna didn't recognize. The voice was rough, male, and carried absolute confidence. "New Haven, this is Colonel Jin of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your distress call. Hold your position. We're coming in hot, Terran." Yuna searched her memory. Humans. The new species from the Outer Rim. She had heard they were primitive, barely capable of faster than light travel. Their technology was centuries behind the galactic standard. Why would they respond when the great powers stayed silent? "This is Commander Yuna," she transmitted back. "Colonel Jin, we're grateful for any assistance, but we need immediate military support. We're facing a Krillian swarm invasion. Do you understand what that means?" "We understand, Commander." The human's voice remained steady. "We're 15 minutes out. Tell your people to stay in cover and mark your defensive positions. We're going to make this messy." The transmission cut off. Hyan looked at Yuna with confusion and desperate hope mixed together on his face. "Commander, humans? They barely have a military. What can they possibly do against the Krillians?" Yuna stared at the tactical display. The Krillian forces were advancing deeper into the city. Her people were dying. The galaxy had abandoned them. And now these humans, these unknowns from the edge of space, were coming to help. "I don't know," she admitted. "But they're the only ones who answered. Broadcast to all Valoran forces. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on just a little longer." In the engineering bay, Nari finally got the power coupling reconnected. The shield emitter hummed back to life, buying them maybe another hour. She collapsed against the wall, exhausted and terrified. Through the window, she could see the Krillian warriors spreading through the streets below. Then she saw something else. Bright streaks cutting across the sky, different from the Krillian pods. These moved with purpose and speed, accompanied by trails of fire. Ships dropping through the atmosphere at dangerous speeds. And above the planet, brilliant flashes marked the beginning of a battle in orbit. Someone had come. Someone was fighting back. Nari pressed her hand against the window and allowed herself one small moment of hope. The human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the new Haven system like predators entering a hunting ground. 15 vessels, led by the battlecruiser Indomitable, accelerated toward the planet with their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They were smaller than the Krillian bioships, built with sharp angles and armored plating instead of the organic curves of the alien vessels. They looked brutal and efficient. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Hana studied the tactical display with cold precision. The Krillian fleet outnumbered them 3-1. 45 bioships against 15 human vessels. Any reasonable commander would wait for reinforcements or attempt a diplomatic solution. But Colonel Jin had made the decision before they even arrived. They were going in, and they were going in hard. "Weapons status," Jin ordered from the command chair. "All railgun batteries charged and ready," Hana reported. "Missile tubes loaded. Point defense systems online. We're ready to engage." "Good. Transmit to the fleet. Attack pattern Delta 7. We're going to punch straight through their formation and engage their capital ships directly. No fancy maneuvers, no holding back. Hit them with everything we have." The other human captains acknowledged the order without hesitation. Hannah felt a surge of pride watching the fleet move into formation. These were Earth's finest, volunteers who had signed up knowing they might never come home. The Terran Expeditionary Force existed for one purpose: to respond when others couldn't, or wouldn't. The Krillian bioships detected the human approach and began moving to intercept. Their organic weapons charged, preparing to fire the bioplasma that could melt through standard hull plating in seconds. They had destroyed civilizations with these ships. They had no reason to fear these newcomers. Then the humans opened fire. Railgun rounds, simple chunks of dense metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed, tore through space. They hit the Krillian bioships with devastating force, punching through organic armor and ripping into vital systems. The aliens had been expecting energy weapons, shields designed to absorb and dissipate heat and radiation. They weren't ready for kinetic impacts that transferred pure momentum. 2 Krillian ships died in the opening volley, their hulls ruptured and bleeding atmosphere. The others scattered, trying to understand what had just happened. That moment of confusion cost them dearly. Human missile spreads followed the railgun barrage. Hundreds of warheads tracking toward Krillian vessels with single-minded determination. Hannah coordinated the Indomitable's attack with practiced efficiency. She targeted the largest bioship in the formation, the one that tactical analysis suggested was the command vessel. Fire all forward batteries. I want that ship crippled. The battlecruiser shuddered as its main guns fired. Massive railgun rounds crossed the distance in seconds, slamming into the Krillian flagship. The bioship's organic armor cracked and split. Green fluid sprayed into space. The alien vessel tried to return fire, but its plasma cannons couldn't track the fast-moving human ship. Below, on New Haven's surface, Commander Yuna watched the orbital battle unfold on her tactical display with disbelief. The humans weren't just fighting. They were winning. Their ships moved with aggressive confidence, pressing attacks that should have been suicidal but somehow worked. They traded damage for kills, sacrificing shields and armor to get close enough for devastating point-blank strikes. Commander, we're detecting atmospheric entry, Hyan reported. Multiple human dropships breaking through the Krillian blockade. They're coming down right in the middle of the heaviest combat zones. Yuna pulled up the feed. Dozens of blocky human transport craft were diving through the burning atmosphere, their hulls glowing red from friction heat. Krillian fighters tried to intercept them, but human escort ships broke formation to protect the transports. She watched one human fighter deliberately ram a Krillian interceptor to save a dropship full of soldiers, the first human. Dropships hit the ground in the western district where Tay's transport had taken shelter. The vehicles were still unloading Valoran civilians when the Krillian warriors reached them. The aliens moved like a living wave, hundreds of them converging on the helpless transport. The Valoran security officers formed a pitiful defensive line, knowing they were about to die, but determined to buy a few more seconds for the civilians to escape. Then the human dropship landed 50 meters away, and everything changed. The rear ramp dropped before the ship even finished touching down. Armored figures poured out, moving with mechanical precision. They wore powered combat suits that made them look twice their normal size, carrying weapons that seemed too large for any living being to handle. Lieutenant Day led the first squad, his visor scanning the battlefield and marking targets in microseconds. Contact front. Krillian warriors, 200 meters and closing. Someone shouted over the squad channel. Weapons free, Day commanded. Show them what Earth sends to extinction events. The human soldiers opened fire, and the sound was like thunder. Their assault rifles fired casually accelerated rounds that tore through Krillian warriors with shocking efficiency. Heavier weapons, squad machine guns, and grenade launchers turned groups of aliens into broken meat. The Krillians, so used to overwhelming primitive species with speed and numbers, suddenly found themselves facing something that hit back harder than they could imagine. Tay watched from the transport window, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The humans fought like nothing he had ever witnessed. They moved as a unit, each soldier covering others, creating interlocking fields of fire that left no safe approach. When Krillian warriors tried their usual tactic of rushing in close for melee combat, the humans met them with powered fists and vibroblades that could cut through alien, chitin-like soft tissue. One Krillian managed to get past the human firing line and leaped at a soldier. The human didn't retreat or panic. He dropped his rifle, caught the alien in midair, and slammed it into the ground with enough force to crack pavement. Then he drew a sidearm and put 3 rounds through its skull before picking up his rifle and returning to formation. Valoran transport. "This is Lieutenant Day." A voice crackled over the emergency channel. "Stay inside your vehicle. We're establishing a defensive perimeter. You're safe now." Safe. Tay almost laughed. An hour ago, safe had seemed like a concept from another lifetime. Now these humans, these strangers from across the galaxy, were making it real again. In orbit, the battle was reaching a critical point. The humans had destroyed 12 Krillian ships but lost 3 of their own. The Indomitable had taken heavy damage, its forward armor melted by bioplasma, but it kept fighting. Captain Hana identified the Krillian command ship trying to retreat to a safer distance. "Colonel, the flagship is pulling back," she reported. Jin stood from his command chair, gripping the railing as another impact shook the ship. "All powered engines. We're going after it. If we take out their command structure, the rest will scatter. Sir, we'll be in range of every Krillian gun in the fleet." "I know. That's why we're taking 2 destroyers with us. They're going to regret answering that distress call." Jin smiled grimly. "Inform the destroyers courage and defiant. They're with us on this run. Everyone else keeps the pressure on the main fleet." The 3 human ships broke formation and accelerated toward the Krillian flagship. Bioplasma fire lit up the space around them. The destroyers absorbed hit after hit, their shields failing and armor melting, but they kept flying. They kept shooting, and they kept protecting the Indomitable as it closed the distance. On New Haven's surface, more human forces were landing. Nari found herself face to face with a human soldier when Krillian warriors breached the engineering bay. The human was female, smaller than the male soldiers, but she fought with the same terrifying efficiency. She carried a compact weapon that fired explosive rounds, each shot turning a Krillian warrior into scattered pieces. "Get behind me," the human shouted in accented Galactic Common. Her name tag read SGT Sora. Nari scrambled back as Sora advanced, firing methodically. When her weapon clicked empty, she didn't pause. She dropped the gun, drew a knife that hummed with energy, and met the next Krillian warrior hand to hand. The fight lasted 3 seconds. The alien died with Sora's blade through its throat. "Are you injured?" Sora asked, pulling Nari to her feet. "No, You saved my life. That's the job. Now let's secure this facility. We need that shield emitter running." Above them all, in the cold void of space, the Indomitable and its escort destroyers reached the Krillian flagship and opened fire at point-blank range. The battle for New Haven raged through the night and into the next day. Human soldiers fought block by block, building by building, pushing the Krillian warriors back from the civilian shelters. The Valorans watched in amazement as these aliens from Earth displayed a level of tactical sophistication that seemed impossible for a species so young to the galactic community. Lieutenant Day's platoon had been fighting for 16 hours straight. Their powered armor was scarred and damaged, their ammunition running low, but they never stopped. They coordinated with Commander Yuna's forces, combining human firepower with Valoran knowledge of the city to set up ambushed and kill zones that devastated the Krillian ground troops. Tay had joined the fight after evacuating the base civilians. He carried a Valoran shock rifle, a weapon designed for stunning criminals, and followed behind a human squad. He watched how they moved, how they communicated with hand signals and short bursts of words. They never panicked, never hesitated. When one soldier was wounded, two others immediately moved to cover him while a medic rushed forward. The medic was a young woman named Isiel. She wore lighter armor than the combat soldiers, marked with red crosses that seemed to make her a target. But she moved through the fighting without fear, treating wounded wherever she found them. Tay saw her save a Valoran security officer who had been clawed by a Krillian warrior, her hands steady as she sealed the bleeding wounds and injected medicine. "Why do you risk yourself like that?" Tay asked when there was a moment of quiet. "You could stay behind the lines." Isiel looked at him while reloading her medical supplies. "Because people are hurt. That's all the reason I need." It was such a simple answer. Tay had expected something profound, some human philosophy about duty or honor. But for Isiel, it was just obvious. Someone needed help, so she helped them. The fact that they were aliens she had never met before didn't matter. In the engineering bay, Nari worked alongside Sergeant Sora to fortify the shield emitter building. Sora taught her how to set up defensive positions, where to place obstacles to slow down attackers, how to create overlapping fields of fire. The human soldier treated her as an equal, explaining military tactics with the same patience Nari's teachers had used when teaching physics. "Your people are artists and scientists," Sora said, while helping Nari reinforce a doorway with metal plating. "That's beautiful. But sometimes the galaxy needs warriors too. Not because violence is good, but because there are things worth protecting, like strangers you've never met before." Nari asked. Sora smiled. "Especially strangers. If we only protected our own people, our own world, we wouldn't be any better than the Krillians. Humanity decided a long time ago that we'd be better than that." The Valoran engineer thought about her brother, about her parents hiding underground, about the millions of civilians whose lives hung in the balance. The humans were fighting and dying for all of them. Not for payment, not for territory, not for political advantage. Just because it was right. On the command platform, Captain Hyan studied the human combat tactics with growing respect and confusion. The humans didn't fight like any military force he had studied. They were aggressive to the point of recklessness, but somehow it worked. They took casualties, but never broke. They suffered setbacks, but never retreated. "Commander, I'm seeing something unusual," he told Yuna. "The human forces are protecting our civilian evacuation routes even when it leaves their own positions vulnerable. They're prioritizing Valoran lives over tactical advantage." Yuna had noticed the same thing. Human soldiers were taking wounds, taking risks, sacrificing optimal positioning to ensure Valoran civilians could escape safely. It made no military sense. It made no political sense. But it made a kind of moral sense that the Valorans, for all their diplomatic sophistication, had never seen enacted with such commitment. A communication came through from Major Wu, the human ground commander. His voice was calm despite the sounds of combat in the background. "Commander Yuna, we need to coordinate for a major offensive. The Krillians are regrouping near the southern industrial sector. If we can destroy their ground portal there, we can cut off their reinforcements. What do you need from us?" Yuna asked. "Your knowledge of the city infrastructure. We can provide the firepower and tactics, but we need guides who know the underground tunnels and service passages. This is going to be dangerous. I won't lie to you about that." Yuna made her decision quickly. "I'm coming personally. Captain Hyan will coordinate from here. Commander, you don't have to Yes, I do. Your people are dying for my world. The least I can do is fight beside them. When Yuna met Major Wu in person, she was surprised by how ordinary he looked without his helmet. Human faces were strange to Valoran eyes, but his expression was easy to read. Determination, fatigue, and a kind of stubborn hope that refused to die no matter how bad things got. We're going to win this, Wu said simply. Not because we're stronger or smarter than the Krillians, but because we're not fighting alone and we're not fighting for conquest. We're fighting because your people deserve to live. That makes us stronger than any swarm. The combined human Valoran force moved through the underground tunnels toward the industrial sector. Tay served as a guide, leading them through passages he had known since childhood. Beside him, Lieutenant Day and his squad moved with weapons ready, scanning for threats. The tunnels were dark and cramped, perfect for Krillian ambushes. They encountered their first enemy patrol in a wide junction. The Krillians had the advantage of numbers and surprise. They should have won, but the humans reacted with inhuman speed, their training overriding panic. Flashbang grenades blinded the aliens. Precise gunfire cut them down before they could close to melee range. The entire fight lasted 12 seconds. You okay? Day asked Tay afterward. The Valoran nodded, trying to stop his hands from shaking. How do you do that? How do you stay so calm when death is so close? Fear is natural, they replied. It keeps you alive. But we train until the right reactions become automatic. When the shooting starts, your body does what it knows while your mind catches up. Plus, we have something to fight for. That makes the fear easier to handle. They reached the industrial sector to find the Krillian ground portal, a massive organic structure that pulsed with sickly light. It was vomiting warriors into the city at a steady rate, hundreds every hour. Destroying it would require getting close enough to plant explosives on its core structure. The Krillians had fortified the area with thousands of warriors. Nari and Sergeant Sora worked together to build a massive explosive device from industrial materials and human military charges. It was crude but powerful, enough to collapse the entire structure. The problem was delivery. Someone would have to carry it through a sea of Krillian warriors. I'll do it, Sora said immediately. We'll do it together, Nari corrected. This is my world. My people. I'm not hiding while others fight. Major Wu approved the plan. Lieutenant Day's platoon would create a distraction on the eastern side, drawing Krillian forces away. Commander Yuna's security teams would provide covering fire from elevated positions. And Nari and Sora would sprint across the killing ground to plant the bomb. The attack began with human artillery raining down on the Krillian positions. Rockets and mortar rounds turned the industrial sector into a hellscape of fire and shrapnel. Day's soldiers charged into the chaos, engaging the aliens at close range. The Krillians responded predictably, sending their warriors to crush the human assault. That's when Nari and Sora made their run. They sprinted across open ground, carrying the heavy explosive device between them. Krillian warriors spotted them and changed direction, recognizing the threat. Bullets from Valoran security forces cut down the nearest aliens. Human soldiers threw themselves in front of others, trading their bodies for seconds of time. Private Asile saw Sora and Nari struggling under Krillian fire. Without hesitation, she left her protected medical station and ran toward them, laying down covering fire with her sidearm. A Krillian warrior caught her with its claws, but she kept firing until Day's squad cut the alien down. Nari reached the portal's core structure with Sora right behind her. They planted the explosive device and activated the timer. 30 seconds. They turned to run, but Krillian warriors blocked their escape route. There were too many. They weren't going to make it. Then Lieutenant Day appeared, his entire squad with him. They formed a wall of armored bodies between the two engineers and the Krillians. "Run!" they shouted. "We'll hold them." Nari and Sora ran while behind them, human soldiers fought and died to buy them seconds. The timer hit 0. The industrial sector erupted in a massive explosion that vaporized the Krillian portal and everything around it. The explosion that destroyed the Krillian ground portal lit up the night sky like a second sun. Nari and Sora stumbled away from the blast zone, their bodies battered but alive. Behind them, the industrial sector was a crater. The portal was gone, and with it, the enemy's ability to bring in fresh warriors. But the cost had been terrible. Lieutenant Day's squad had been at ground zero when the bomb detonated. Only 3 of his 12 soldiers made it out. Day himself was barely conscious. His armor cracked and his body burned. Medic Iziel worked frantically to stabilize him while Krillian stragglers tried one last desperate attack. Tay stood over them with his shock rifle, firing at anything that moved, protecting the humans who had protected his world. In orbit, the battle had reached its critical moment. The Indomitable hung in space like a wounded predator. Its hull breached in a dozen places, atmosphere venting from ruptured compartments. The 2 escort destroyers, Courage and Defiant, had sacrificed themselves to get the battlecruiser close enough to the Krillian flagship. Both destroyers were now drifting wrecks, their crews evacuated in the final moments before catastrophic failure. Captain Hannah studied the tactical display through blood and sweat. The Krillian flagship was crippled but not destroyed. Its bioplasma cannons were still charging for one final shot that would split the Indomitable in half. The human fleet was scattered, engaged with the remaining Krillian bioships. No one was in position to help. Colonel Jin sat in his command chair, his left arm immobilized from an earlier impact. He looked at the enemy flagship, then at his crew. Young men and women from Earth, volunteers who had traveled light years to fight for strangers. They were exhausted, wounded, and scared. But they were still here, still fighting. "Captain Hannah," Jin said quietly, "evacuate all non-essential personnel. Get them to the escape pods." Hannah understood immediately what he was planning. "Sir, you can't. We can still. We're out of ammunition, our engines are damaged, and shields are gone. But we still have mass and velocity." Jin smiled sadly. "Sometimes the oldest weapons are the best weapons. That flagship dies here today, even if we have to ram it. Then I'm staying with you," Hannah said firmly. "That's an order, Captain." "With respect, sir, you're not my captain. You're my colonel, and I'm the senior officer on the bridge. This is my ship to command in combat situations. So if you're ramming that alien bastard, I'm piloting." Jin wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. The same determination he had seen in every human soldier on this mission. The stubborn refusal to abandon their duty or their friends. "Very well. All hands, this is Colonel Jin. Abandon ship. I repeat, abandon ship. You have 3 minutes to reach escape pods." The crew hesitated, but discipline held. They moved quickly, professionally, helping wounded comrades toward the escape hatches. Within 2 minutes, the Indomitable was nearly empty. Only Jin and Hannah remained on the bridge, along with a skeleton crew of volunteers who refused to leave. 6 people to pilot a dying battlecruiser on its final mission, on New Haven's surface. The destruction of the ground portal had broken the Krillian coordination. Without reinforcements and with their command structure in chaos, the alien warriors fought as desperate individuals rather than a unified swarm. Major Wu organized the final push, combining all remaining human and Valan forces for one massive assault to clear the capital. Commander Yuna fought beside the humans now, carrying a human rifle that felt heavy and brutal in her hands. She had spent her entire life avoiding violence, believing in diplomacy and peaceful solutions. But watching these humans fight and bleed for her people had changed something fundamental in her understanding. Sometimes, peace had to be defended with force. Sometimes the moral choice was to fight. "Stay close to me," a human sergeant told her. "When we breach that building, there's going to be a lot of Krullians inside. Just point and shoot. The rifle will do the rest." The assault began at dawn. Human artillery softened the Krullian positions while infantry squads moved in coordinated waves. The aliens fought back with desperate ferocity, but they were surrounded, outnumbered, and facing an enemy that simply would not stop. Human soldiers advanced through fire and death, never faltering, never retreating. Tay saw a human soldier take 3 Krullian claws to the chest. The wounds should have been fatal, but the soldier kept fighting for another 20 seconds, killing 2 more aliens before finally collapsing. Another human immediately took his position, maintaining the formation as if it was the most natural thing in the world to step over your dying friend and keep fighting. It wasn't that humans didn't feel pain or grief. Tay could see it in their faces when they lost someone. But they had something stronger than fear. They had purpose. They had each other. And they had an unshakable belief that what they were doing mattered. In the engineering bay, Nari and Sergeant Sora had returned to defend the shield emitter. More Krullians were trying to destroy it, a last desperate attempt to leave the city vulnerable. Sora had taken a bad wound to her leg but refused to evacuate. She sat behind a makeshift barricade, firing methodically and approaching enemies. "You should go," Nari told her. "I can hold here." "You're hurt." "Not that hurt," Sora replied. "Besides, we make a good team. You keep the machines running. I keep the monsters away. That's how it works." A wave of Krullians rushed the position. Nari fired her shock rifle, the weapon stunning aliens in buying seconds. Sora's explosive rounds turned those seconds into dead enemies. They fought back to back, alien and human, protecting something bigger than themselves. Above them, in the cold void of space, the Indomitable made its final approach. The Krullian flagship detected the threat and turned all remaining weapons toward the human battlecruiser. Bioplasma lanced through space, melting armor and burning through interior compartments. Alarms screamed. Systems failed. Fire spread through the ship. Captain Hannah kept her hand steady on the controls, guiding the dying vessel toward its target. Beside her, Colonel Jin watched the distance close. "It's been an honor, Captain." "The honor was mine, sir." The skeleton crew worked frantically to keep the engines online just a few more seconds. A young ensign named Bora rerouted power from life support to the main drives. An engineer called Dongha manually sealed bulkheads to protect the bridge. They were all going to die, and they all knew it, and not one of them suggested turning back. The Krullian flagship fired one last desperate salvo. It tore through the Indomitable's bow, vaporizing the forward sections. But momentum and mass don't care about damage. The battlecruiser kept coming, a 12,000-ton projectile moving at significant fraction of orbital velocity. "Captain," Hana watched the enemy ship grow larger in the view screen. She thought about Earth, about the blue skies and green fields she would never see again. She thought about the Valorans below, the peaceful species that would live because humans had chosen to die. It was a fair trade. For Earth, she whispered. For everyone who can't fight for themselves. Jin added. The Indomitable struck the Krullian flagship like the hammer of an angry god. The impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. Both ships disintegrated in a massive explosion that lit up the entire system. The shockwave damaged nearby Krullian vessels and broke their formation completely. On the surface, every human in the Lorne stopped fighting for a moment to watch the distant explosion. They knew what it meant. Colonel Jin was gone. Captain Hannah was gone. The brave crew of the Indomitable had sacrificed themselves to destroy the enemy command structure. For a moment, There was silence. Then Major Wu's voice crackled over every human communication channel. The Colonel wanted us to win. So we're going to win. All units, advance. No mercy for the Krillians. No surrender. We finish this for the Indomitable. The human soldiers roared in response, a primal sound of grief and rage and determination. They surged forward with renewed fury, crushing the remaining Krillian forces with overwhelming violence. The aliens broke and ran that there was nowhere to go. The humans hunted them down systematically, methodically, without hesitation or mercy. By noon, the battle for New Haven was over. The Krillian swarm had been destroyed, their invasion shattered, their forces annihilated. The cost had been enormous. 6 human ships destroyed, thousands of soldiers dead. But 7 million Valorans had survived, and the galaxy had witnessed something it had never seen before. Humanity, fighting not for conquest or glory, but because someone needed help, and they were the only ones who answered. 3 days after the battle ended, New Haven still smelled of smoke and death. But life was returning to the streets. Valoran civilians emerged from underground shelters, blinking in the sunlight, hardly believing they had survived. The beautiful gardens were trampled and burned. The flowing canals were clogged with debris. The artistic architecture that the Valorans took such pride in was scarred with weapons, fire and blast damage, but they were alive. 7 million people who should have died were walking, breathing, crying with relief and joy and grief for those who hadn't made it. And working among them, helping clear rubble and restore power and treat the wounded, were the humans who had saved them. Commander Yuna stood in the central plaza where they had built a memorial. It was a simple structure, just a wall of polished stone with names carved into it. Human names and Valoran names, side by side. The dead from both species, who had fought together and died together defending this world. She ran her fingers over the letters that spelled out Colonel Jin and Captain Hannah and the crew of the Indomitable. They would have liked this, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Major Wu, his arm in a sling and his face bearing fresh scars. Simple and honest. That's how humans prefer their memorials. Why did they do it? Yuna asked, the question that had haunted her since the battle ended. They barely knew us. They had no political obligation, no treaty, no strategic interest in our world. Why did Colonel Jin sacrifice his ship? Why did so many humans die for strangers? Wu was quiet for a moment, looking at the names on the wall. Because nobody else did. Because you needed help and we could give it. What other reason do we need? But the cost was worth it. Wu's voice was firm. Every human who came here volunteered. We knew the risks. We knew we might not come home. But we also knew that if we didn't act, 7 million people would die. How could we live with ourselves if we let that happen when we could have prevented it? Yuna understood, but it still seemed impossible. The galactic community didn't work that way. Species acted in their own interests, protected their own territories, formed alliances based on mutual benefit. The idea of sacrificing so much for nothing in return was alien to every civilization she knew, except, apparently, humanity. In the medical facility that human engineers had helped restore, Private Eziol was treating wounded from both species. Her own injuries, the claw marks from the Krillian warrior, were bandaged but not fully healed. She should have been resting. Instead, she worked 18-hour shifts because there were people who needed help. Tay had been assisting her, learning human medical techniques. He watched her work with the same gentle efficiency she had shown on the battlefield. Patient, thorough, treating everyone with equal care regardless of species or severity of injury. You could go home, he told her during a rare break. The worst is over. Your military would probably give you leave to recover. Iziel smiled tiredly. There's still work to do here. People still need help. Besides, I've grown fond of you Valorans. You remind us that there are things worth protecting in the galaxy. We're so weak compared to you. We can't fight like humans do. Strength isn't just about fighting, Isil said gently. Your people built a beautiful civilization based on art and science and peaceful cooperation. That's harder than learning to shoot a gun. The galaxy needs both kinds of strength. Warriors to protect and artists to create things worth protecting. In the engineering bay, Nari worked with Sergeant Sora to design new defensive systems for New Haven. The Valaran government had realized that their complete pacifism had left them vulnerable. They needed defenses, but they wanted to build them the right way. Combining their technology with human tactical thinking, Sora's leg was healing, but she walked with a limp that would probably never fully disappear. She didn't seem to care. She was focused on teaching Nari everything she knew about defensive architecture, automated weapon systems, and early warning networks. The key is a layered defense, Sora explained, pointing at the holographic designs they were developing. You don't rely on one system. You have redundancy, backup plans, ways to slow down attackers even if primary defenses fail. It seems so aggressive, Nari said. So different from how we think. Defense isn't aggression. It's preparation. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. That way, when peace fails, you're ready to protect what matters. Lieutenant Day had recovered enough to attend the official ceremony where the Lieutenant Day had recovered enough to attend the official ceremony where the Kuding the official ceremony where the Tsinent Day had recovered enough to Valoran government formally thanked the human forces. His body was still healing from the explosion, covered in scars that would mark him for life. He stood with the surviving members of his platoon, only 7 of the original 12, wearing their dress uniforms with quiet pride. The Valoran Prime Minister spoke about gratitude and friendship and eternal bonds between their peoples. The humans listened politely, but Day could tell his soldiers were uncomfortable with the praise. They hadn't fought for recognition or reward. They had fought because it was right. After the ceremony, Captain Hyan approached Day privately. I need to ask you something that's been bothering me. When your squad held the line at the portal, you knew you probably wouldn't survive. Why did you stay? Why not retreat and find another way? Day considered the question carefully. Because if we retreated, Nari and Sora would have died. The bomb wouldn't have been planted. The portal would have kept bringing in Krillians. And your people would have been slaughtered. So there was no real choice. We stayed because staying was the only way to protect what mattered. But you barely knew us. Doesn't matter. You needed help. We could provide it. That's enough. Hyan shook his head in wonder. The galaxy isn't ready for humans. You're going to change everything. Maybe that's not a bad thing, they replied. Word of what happened at New Haven spread through the galactic community faster than light-speed communication. The story became legend almost immediately. The primitive humans who faced a Krillian swarm and won, who sacrificed 6 ships and thousands of soldiers to save a species they barely knew, who fought not for territory or resources or political advantage, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Some species dismissed it as propaganda. Some claimed the humans must have had hidden motives. But others began to wonder, if these newcomers from Earth were willing to fight and die for strangers, what did that say about the rest of the galaxy that had stayed silent? The Therosian Empire, which had claimed it was too far away to help New Haven, suddenly found itself facing difficult questions from its own citizens. The Confederation of Free Worlds, which had offered only thoughts and prayers, discovered that its reputation for moral leadership had been badly damaged. The core systems, which had promised aid after the battle, were now seen as cowards who let others fight while they stayed safe. Humanity didn't gloat or make demands. Major Wu gave a simple statement to the galactic press. We did what any decent civilization should do. We helped someone who needed it. We'd hope others would do the same for us if our positions were reversed. But everyone knew that hope was different from expectation. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten or perhaps never truly believed, that there was value in standing up for others. That sacrifice for strangers wasn't foolish but noble. That the strong had a responsibility to protect the weak, not exploit them. On the day the human fleet prepared to depart, thousands of Valorans gathered in the plaza to say goodbye. Yuna stood with Major Wu and the other human commanders, trying to find words adequate to express her people's gratitude. None existed. "We can never repay what you've done for us," she said finally. "You saved our entire civilization. Our children will grow up because of your sacrifice. How can we ever thank you enough?" Wu smiled. "You already have. You survived. You're rebuilding. You're learning to protect yourselves while staying true to your peaceful nature. That's all we wanted. A galaxy where beautiful civilizations like yours can exist without fear. Will you come back?" Nari asked us Sergeant Sora, "Will we see you again?" "Maybe," Sora said. "The galaxy is big and humanity is still exploring. But even if we don't meet again, you'll be okay. You're stronger than you think. And now you know that there are others out there who will help when you need it." Tay stood with Private Isiel, who had taught him so much about courage and compassion. "Will Earth send more soldiers? Help other species like you helped us?" "Probably," Isiel said. "That's what the Terran Expeditionary Force does. We go where we're needed. We help who we can help. It's not always successful. We don't always win, but we always try." Lieutenant Day gathered his surviving squad members for one final formation on Valoran soil. They stood in silence for a moment, remembering those who hadn't made it home. Then they boarded their transport ship, leaving behind a world they had bled for and people they had saved. The human fleet departed New Haven with fewer ships than they arrived with. They carried the bodies of their dead, preserved for burial back on Earth. They carried wounds that would take months to heal. But they also carried the knowledge that they had made a difference. That 7 million lives continued because they had been willing to risk everything. Commander, Yuna watched the human ships accelerate toward the jump point. She thought about Colonel Jin and Captain Hana, who had rammed their dying battlecruiser into the enemy flagship.